The air inside Northgate Preparatory Academy's gymnasium always smelled the same, a unique cocktail of floor wax, old sweat, and the electric hum of adolescent anxiety. For 4 years, that smell had been the backdrop to my life. But today, sitting at a Cyril fold-out table for the AP Calculus final, the anxiety wasn't mine. It was a low-frequency buzz emanating from the other 200 seniors in the room, a collective panic that I observed with a kind of clinical detachment. For me, this exam wasn't a hurdle. It was a victory lap. My name is Elena Villanueva, and my life, up to that point, had been a masterclass in controlled variables, 4.0 GPA. Check. Captain of the debate team? Check. Acceptance letters from my top 3 universities? Check, check, and check. My future was a pristine, perfectly calculated equation, and this exam was the final, satisfying QED. I looked down at the test booklet, my hand steady, my mind clear. I was ready. As the proctor droned on about the rules, my eyes drifted across. Rows of bowed heads. I saw Zach Warner a few tables over. Zach was the opposite of a controlled variable. He was chaos in a Letterman jacket, the son of a tech billionaire who had donated the school's new science wing. Zach moved through Northgate's hallways with the unearned confidence of a minor prince. He wasn't stupid, but he was lazy, accustomed to having his path smoothed for him by his father's checkbook. He caught my eye and gave me a lazy, lopsided grin. I gave him a small, polite nod in return and immediately went back to focusing on my desk. The exam began. For 2 hours, the only sound was the scratching of pencils and the frantic rustle of paper. I moved through the problems with the fluid efficiency of a marathon runner in their final mile. Derivatives, integrals, theorems, they were old, familiar friends. With 10 minutes to spare, I put my pencil down, my booklet filled with neat, confident calculations. I was done. As I was double-checking my work, a small clatter broke my concentration. Zach Warner's mechanical pencil had rolled off his desk and landed near my foot. He made a show of looking for it, craning his neck. I subtly nudged it with my shoe back towards his table without making eye contact. The proctor shot him a warning glance. Zach just shrugged, picked it up, and went back to frantically bubbling in answers. It was a tiny, insignificant moment. A single anomalous data point in an otherwise perfect morning. I thought nothing of it. 2 days later, my world ended. It happened during third period. A student aide, a freshman with a bad case of hero worship, knocked on the door of my AP government class and handed a note to my teacher, Mr. Davies. He read it, his brow furrowed, and then looked at me. Maya, Principal Thompson needs to see you in his office. The class went quiet. A summons to the principal's office was rarely a good thing, but I felt no alarm. I was probably being called down to discuss my valedictorian speech or a scholarship. Application. I gave Mr. Davies a reassuring smile. Of course. As I gathered my things, he gave me a supportive nod. Whatever it is, I'm sure it's fine, Maya. You're our star. The walk to the office was a familiar one. The hallway walls were lined with photos of past valedictorians, a lineage I was about to join. My own photo would be up there soon. I felt a surge of pride. I had earned my place in this school. I had worked for it. The principal's office was designed to intimidate. It was large and opulent, with a dark mahogany desk the size of a small boat and walls covered in plaques and awards. The air smelled of leather and lemon polish. Principal Thompson sat behind his desk, his fingers steepled under his chin. He had the kind of practiced, empty smile that politicians use. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. His eyes were cold, hard, and calculating, and he was not alone. Sitting in the chair opposite his desk, looking small and nervous, was Zach Warner. My sense of calm evaporated, replaced by a cold, prickling unease. This was not about my valedictorian speech. Maya, please have a seat. Principal Thompson said, gesturing to the chair next to Zach. His voice was smooth, but it had an edge. I sat down, my back ramrod straight. Thank you for coming down. Mia, he began, we have a very serious matter to discuss. A matter of academic integrity. The phrase hung in the air. Academic integrity? I looked at Zach. He refused to meet my gaze, staring intently at a spot on the plush oriental rug. An allegation has been made, Thompson continued, his eyes fixed on me, concerning the AP calculus exam you took on Monday. My mind raced, trying to compute this new impossible variable. An allegation? What kind of allegation? Thompson slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a small folded note, the kind kids pass in class. I unfolded it. Inside, written in small, cramped block letters, were a series of complex calculus formulas, the exact formulas needed for the most difficult questions on the final. This was found on the floor near your desk after the exam. Thompson said, his voice flat. I stared at the note, then back at him, my mind struggling to process the absurdity. I've never seen this before in my life. Zach, here, tells a different story, Thompson said, turning his gaze to the other student. Zach, why don't you tell Maya what you told me? Zach took a shaky breath, performing his role with theatrical reluctance. I didn't want to say anything, he mumbled, his voice thick with counterfeit emotion. Maya's like the smartest person in school, but it's not right. He finally looked at me, his eyes wide with feigned sincerity. I saw you, Maya, during the exam. You had that note under your booklet, and you were looking at your phone. I saw the light from the screen. The accusation was so ludicrous, so completely untethered from reality, that my first reaction was a short, sharp laugh of disbelief. What? That's insane. I didn't have a phone. We were told to leave them in our lockers, and I certainly didn't have that, I said, pointing a trembling finger at the cheat sheet dot. My mind was working now, the shock giving way to cold, clear logic. I started connecting the data points. The dropped pencil, his manufactured distraction. This note, it was a setup, a clumsy, almost comical setup. Principal Thompson, I said, my voice steady and firm. I was a debater. I knew how to construct an argument. This is absurd. Look at my record. I have a 4.0 GPA. I've aced every math test I've ever taken in this school. I am the captain of the debate team and a National Merit Scholar. Why in the world would I need to cheat on a test I was perfectly prepared for? Thompson listened, his expression unreadable. Furthermore, I pressed on, the evidence is ridiculous. A handwritten note that anyone could have written and dropped on the floor. An accusation of using a phone that you can easily verify wasn't on my person. And this accusation comes from Zach Warner. With all due respect, what's his academic record? How many times has he been brought before the disciplinary committee for academic dishonesty in the past? I knew for a fact he'd been caught plagiarizing an English paper just last year. Zach flushed a deep, ugly red. That's not fair. This isn't about me. I think it might be, I countered, my voice sharp. I think this is about you failing a test and needing someone to take the fall. I think you wrote this note, dropped it near my desk, when you created a distraction with your pencil and are now lying to save your own skin. It was a perfect, logical rebuttal. I had presented the facts. I had questioned the witnesses. Credibility. I had established my own character. In any fair and just hearing, my argument would have been devastating. But this was not a fair and just hearing. This was a show trial. Principal Thompson held up a hand, silencing me. That's enough, Maya. His voice was laced with a chilling disappointment, as if I were the one letting him down. I find your aggressive counter-accusations very telling. A guilty mind often seeks to deflect blame. I stared at him, dumbfounded. A guilty mind. I'm defending myself against a lie. Zach came to me, wrestling with his conscience, Thompson said, his tone now sanctimonious. He did the right thing. He upheld the honor code of this institution. You, on the other hand, show no remorse, only defiance. Remorse? For what? For a crime I didn't commit? The room began to feel like it was tilting on its axis. The logic I had built my entire life on was crumbling. Facts didn't matter here. My record didn't matter. The truth didn't matter. The verdict had already been decided before I even walked through the door. Zach Werner's father's name was on the science wing. My family's name was on nothing more than my report card. It was a simple, brutal equation of power. Northgate Preparatory Academy has a zero-tolerance policy for cheating, Principal Thompson said, his voice taking on the booming, official tone he used in school assemblies. We must send a clear message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated, regardless of who the student is. The irony of that statement was so profound, it made me want to scream. It is a sad day when one of our brightest students falls so far. He opened a drawer in his desk and pulled out an official letterhead. He signed it with a flourish. Elena Villanueva, he said, his eyes as cold and dead as a winter sky. Effective immediately, you are expelled from this institution. The word echoed in the silent room. Expelled. It wasn't just a word. It was the sound of my future being strangled in its cradle. Valedictorian. Gone. My scholarships. Gone. My acceptances to Stanford, Yale, and Duke. All would be rescinded. Everything I had worked for, every late night studying, every weekend spent on extracurriculars, every single sacrifice I had made for 4 years, all of it was erased in a single venomous breath. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind of calm that comes from profound shock. I looked at Zach. He was trying to look sad, but I could see the flicker of triumphant relief in his eyes. He had done it. He had found a scapegoat. Then I looked at Principal Thompson. He was looking at me with an expression of performative pity, the benevolent executioner. He was protecting his school's reputation, protecting a wealthy donor, and I was just collateral damage. A loose end to be tidied up. He pushed the letter across the desk. It was an official notice of expulsion. At the top, in stark black ink, was the date, July 28th, 2025. I stood up, my movement stiff and robotic. I took the letter. The paper felt cold in my hand. I didn't say another word. There was nothing left to say. They had already written my ending. I turned and walked out of the office. The school secretary, a woman who had congratulated me just last week for winning the state debate championship, wouldn't meet my eyes. The familiar hallway with its gallery of smiling valedictorians seemed to mock me. I was a ghost now, haunting the place where my future used to be. I walked out the main doors of Northgate Preparatory Academy for the last time, the expulsion letter clutched in my hand, my mind a perfect, terrifying, silent blank. My world hadn't just ended. It had been murder. The 10-minute drive home from school felt like a journey across an alien planet. The familiar suburban streets, the manicured lawns, the cheerful afternoon sun, it all seemed like a cheap movie set. A flat and unconvincing backdrop to the gaping void that had opened up in my life. I drove on autopilot, my knuckles white, on the steering wheel. The expulsion letter sat on the passenger seat, its crisp official letterhead a stark white tombstone marking the death of my future. My mind was a silent white static. The shock was a merciful anesthetic, holding the grief and the rage at bay. For now, our house was a handsome 2-story colonial at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac. It was a house built on success, on discipline, on my mother's formidable will. As I walked through the front door into the cool, quiet entryway, I heard her voice coming from her home office. It was her work voice, a smooth, commanding tone that broke no argument and suffered no fools. My mother, Elena Villanueva, was not just a lawyer. She was a litigator, one of the most feared corporate attorneys in the state. She didn't argue cases, she eviscerated them. She was a warrior who wore tailored suits as armor and wielded the law like a weapon. Their motion is frivolous, and we will treat it as such, she was saying, presumably to some poor soul on the other end of a conference call. File for dismissal and include a demand for sanctions. I want them buried in so much paper they forget what the sky looks like. I'll see you in the morning. The call ended. I stood frozen in the hallway, the expulsion letter feeling like it was burning a hole in my hand. How was I going to tell her? How could I explain this cataclysmic failure to a woman who had never failed at anything in her life? My perfect record, my flawless transcript, my collection of awards, these weren't just my achievements. They were offerings to her, proof that her sacrifices as a single mother had been worth it. And I had just managed to set it all on fire. She emerged from her office, pulling off her reading glasses. Her stern, professional mask softened the moment she saw me. The warrior was gone, and in her place was my mom. Maya, you're home early. She said, her smile warm. How was your day, Anak? The Tagalog word for child, so full of love and warmth, was the pin that burst the anesthetic bubble. The static in my head resolved into a single screaming sound. The grief and the rage and the sheer, crushing injustice of it all came crashing down on me at once. The letter slipped from my numb fingers and fluttered to the floor. And then, for the first time that day, I broke. The sobs came out in ragged, ugly gasps, my body shaking with the force of a world collapsing. My mother was there in an instant, her arms around me, holding me up as my legs gave way. She didn't ask questions. She just held me, murmuring soothing words, her hand stroking my hair as I cried into her silk blouse. She guided me to the living room sofa and sat with me until the storm of tears subsided into a miserable, hiccuping quiet. Finally, she picked up the letter from the floor. I watched her read it, her face a carefully composed mask. Her eye-sharp, analytical lawyer's eyes scanned the page once, then twice. The mask didn't slip, but I saw a muscle twitch in her jaw. Tell me everything, she said, her voice quiet, calm, and dangerously level, from the beginning. Omit nothing. And so I told her. Sitting on that sofa, surrounded by the quiet elegance of our home, I recounted the entire sordid story, the exam, the dropped pencil, the summons to the office, the cheat sheet, Zach's practice line performance, my logical, useless defense, Principal Thompson's sanctimonious speech, every last humiliating detail. I wasn't a hysterical teenager anymore. I was a witness giving a statement, my debater's mind replaying the events with a chilling forensic clarity. My mother listened without interruption. She didn't react with outrage or sympathy. She listened like she was listening to a client, her gaze intense, her mind absorbing and processing every fact. When I was finished, the room was silent. For a long time, he accused you of having a phone? She asked finally. Yes, he never asked to check my pockets or my bag. And the note was handwritten? Yes, in block letters. It didn't look like my handwriting at all. And Zach Warner's father is James Warner, CEO of Warner Dynamics. He funded the entire new STEM wing last year. My mother nodded slowly, her eyes distant. She was no longer looking at me. She was looking at the pieces of a puzzle, seeing the shape they formed. A wealthy donor's underachieving son, a star student from a less connected family, and an ambitious principal with a reputation to protect. She murmured, more to herself than to me. It's a classic narrative. Mom, I didn't do it, I whispered, the words feeling thin and pointless. You have to believe me. The leaving you is not the issue, Maya, she said, her voice still professionally calm. I know you didn't do it. The facts don't support the conclusion. This wasn't a search for the truth. This was a disposal of a problem. She stood up and began to pace, the litigator taking over. The legal standard for expulsion in this state is high. It requires substantial, credible evidence. A note found on the floor and the uncorroborated testimony of another student, a student with a history of academic dishonesty, I might add, does not meet that standard, not even close. A small sliver of hope cut through my despair. So, you can fix it? The first step is a simple appeal, she said, thinking out loud. We approach this calmly. We present ourselves as reasonable people seeking to correct a simple, unfortunate mistake. I will call Principal Thompson. I will explain the situation, parent to administrator. No threats, no legal jargon. We give him the opportunity to be a hero, to admit the school acted too hastily, and to reverse the decision quietly. It sounded too simple, too clean. But she was my mother. She was the smartest person I knew. I trusted her. I watched as she went to her desk, found the school's number, and dialed. Her entire demeanor shifted. The sharp edges softened. Her voice became warm, concerned, the voice of any loving mother. Yes, hello. This is Elena Villanueva. I'm Maya Villanueva's mother, she said into the phone. I'm calling about a disciplinary matter. Yes, I can hold. She waited, her foot tapping a silent, impatient rhythm. On the hardwood floor, Principal Thompson? Yes, thank you for taking my call. My name is Elena Villanueva. That's right, Maya's mother. Listen, I think there has been a significant misunderstanding regarding the events of this afternoon. I watched her face as she listened to his response. I saw the warmth in her eyes slowly chill. I saw her polite smile tighten into a thin, hard line. I saw the muscle in her jaw begin to tick again, this time more pronounced. I understand your position, Mr. Thompson, she said, her voice losing its warmth, becoming dangerously polite. But as I'm sure you'll agree, Maya's unblemished 4-year record should carry some weight against. No, I'm not questioning your authority. I am questioning your evidence. I see. So you have a note of unknown origin and the word of a student who has previously been suspended for plagiarism. Yes, I am aware of your zero-tolerance policy. I would argue that policy should also apply to bearing false witness. Another long pause. Her eyes narrowed. Let me be very clear, Mr. Thompson. Are you telling me that you are unwilling to even review the evidence, or to consider the possibility that your star student, the valedictorian of this graduating class, has been falsely accused? She listened for a final 10 seconds. Her face became a perfect, cold mask of stone. I see, she said, her voice now flat and devoid of all emotion. Thank you for your time. You have made your position perfectly clear. Goodbye. She ended the call and stood motionless for a moment, her back to me. The quiet in the room was heavy, electric. When she turned around, the mother was gone. The warrior was back. Her eyes were glittering with a cold, terrifying fire I had seen only once before, during the closing arguments of a major trial she had let me watch. It was the look of a predator that had just been handed a declaration of war. Okay, she said, her voice a low, controlled hum. Plan A has failed. We now proceed to Plan B. What's Plan B? I asked, my voice trembling. Plan B, she said, walking towards the kitchen, is that we burn them to the ground. She didn't yell. She didn't rage. She started to cook. It was her ritual, something she did before every major battle. She pulled onions and garlic from the pantry, pork belly from the fridge. Soon, the sharp, tangy scent of sinigang, her favorite, Comfort food from her own childhood in the Philippines began to fill the house. It was the smell of home, the smell of family, and the smell of war. He was condescending, she said, chopping vegetables with a frightening precision. He was dismissive. He called Maya your daughter as if she were a faulty appliance I needed to fix. He didn't talk to me like a parent. He talked to me like an obstacle. She dumped the vegetables into the pot. He has no idea who he's talking to. He has no idea the hornet's nest he just kicked. She turned to me, her eyes blazing. They think they can ruin your life, Anak. They think they can railroad my daughter and there will be no consequences. They have mistaken this. Family for one that breaks. We do not break. We fight back. The despair that had been crushing me began to recede, replaced by a surge of adrenaline, of hope, of her own cold fury. My mother was no longer just my mother. She was my champion. Here's what's going to happen, she said, her voice now crisp and strategic. Tomorrow morning, I will be filing a lawsuit against Northgate Preparatory Academy, the school district, and Principal Thompson and Zach Warner as individuals. The charges will be wrongful expulsion, defamation of character, slander, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We will be seeking $20 million in damages. My jaw dropped. $20 million? It's not about the money, she said dismissively. It's about getting their attention. It's about making them hurt. The lawsuit will trigger the discovery process. That means we get everything. Emails, text messages, internal memos, disciplinary records, security footage. Everything they think is hidden, we will drag out into the light. She pointed a knife at me, and that's where you come in. You are no longer just the victim, Maya. You are now the lead analyst on this case. Your mind, your memory for detail, your ability to see patterns, that's our greatest weapon. I need you to write down everything. Every interaction you've ever had with Thompson and Zach. Every rumor you've ever heard about special treatment for athletes or donors. Kids. Every detail. We're going to build a timeline so airtight, so damning, that by the time we're done, they will be begging us to settle. She handed me a fresh legal pad and a pen. Get to work, counselor. I looked down at the empty yellow page. A few hours ago, my future was a blank void. Now it was a battle plan. The fear and grief were still there, but they were now fuel for a new fire. A fire my mother had just lit. We were a team. The Villanueva women, and we were going to war. I uncapped the pen and began to write. The morning of Tuesday, July 29th, 2025, dawned with a strange new clarity. The world outside my window was the same, but my world had been irrevocably altered. The crushing weight of despair was still there, a cold stone in my stomach, but now it was accompanied by something else, the low humming thrum of purpose. My mother was already dressed when I came downstairs. She was wearing what I called her battle dress, a razor-sharp, dark navy suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wasn't my mom today. She was Elena Villanueva-esque. Good morning, Anak, she said, handing me a mug of strong coffee. Did you sleep? No, I admitted. I was writing. I handed her the legal pad. It was filled, front and back, with my neat, precise handwriting, detailing every interaction, every timeline, every inconsistency I could remember from my 4 years at Northgate. She took the pad and scanned the first page, her eyes moving with terrifying speed. A small, grim smile touched her lips. Excellent. This is a good start. This is our foundation. She spent the next 2 hours on the phone with her firm's top paralegal, dictating the complaint. I sat at the kitchen table, listening as she wove my messy, painful experience into a formidable legal tapestry. The language was a foreign country to me, but I understood the sentiment. It was controlled, righteous fury, codified into the language of the law. Count 1, she dictated, pacing the kitchen. Wrongful expulsion. The defendants, Northgate Preparatory Academy and Principal Daniel Thompson, acted with malice and a reckless disregard for the truth. Their investigation is sham, designed to produce a predetermined outcome. Count 2, defamation. The defendants knowingly and publicly communicated false information, namely the allegation of cheating that has caused and will continue to cause irreparable harm to the plaintiff's academic career, reputation, and future earning potential. Count 3, intentional infliction of emotional distress. Their actions were extreme and outrageous, exceeding all possible bounds of decency. On and on it went. By the time she was done, she had constructed a legal weapon of such overwhelming force that I almost felt a flicker of pity for the school. Almost. File it this morning. She instructed her paralegal. Serve the school district, Thompson, and the Werner family by lunchtime. And notify the press. I want a copy of the complaint hand-delivered to every major news outlet in the state by 3 o'clock. The first salvo had been fired. The response was immediate. By evening, it was the lead story on the local news. Honor student sues Northgate Prep for $20 million. My yearbook photo was plastered on the screen, next to a grim-looking photo of Principal Thompson. The school issued a terse defensive statement. We are confident that our disciplinary procedures are fair and just. We do not comment on pending litigation. The next day, we were notified that the school district had retained the services of Sterling Croft and Dunn, a massive white shoe law firm known for defending corporations. They were bringing in the big guns. My mother laughed when she heard the news. Good, she said, a predatory glint in her eye. They're scared. They're spending a fortune on lawyers who will bill them $700 an hour to read my complaint. Let them spend. Let them bleed. The lawsuit kicked off the discovery process and our house transformed. The dining room, which had hosted polite family dinners, became a document review center. My mother's firm delivered dozens of bankers' boxes filled with physical files and, more importantly, a set of hard drives containing terabytes of digital data. The entire digital history of Northgate Preparatory Academy was now at our fingertips. It was an ocean of information, and somewhere in that ocean was the proof we needed. This is where cases are won or lost. Maya, my mother explained, gesturing to the mountain of data. Not in the courtroom, but right here, and the details. Their lawyers are legally obligated to turn over everything we requested. They'll try to bury us in useless information, hoping we miss the important stuff. We won't. My role as lead analyst began. My mother set me up with a sophisticated e-discovery software, the same kind her firm used. My years of being a diligent, meticulous student became my greatest asset. I wasn't studying for an exam anymore. I was studying my enemy. I created spreadsheets. I built timelines. I ran keyword searches. Zach Warner, James Warner, cheating, expulsion, donation, handle. The first few weeks were a slog. I read through thousands of mind-numbingly boring emails, staff memos about parking assignments, school lunch menus, parent complaints about the drama club's choice of musical. It was a deluge of the mundane, designed to dull the senses and exhaust the searcher, but I was relentless. I was fueled by coffee and a cold, burning rage. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. I found an email chain from the previous year where the football coach begged Principal Thompson not to suspend his star quarterback for getting caught with alcohol on a school trip. Thompson's reply was telling, given the upcoming championship and the player's importance to the team, we can handle this with an internal detention. No need for it to go on his permanent record. I saved it. I found another thread from 2 years ago. A girl, the daughter of a prominent local politician, had been caught plagiarizing a history paper. The teacher had recommended a failing grade and suspension. Thompson had intervened. "Let's give her a chance to rewrite the paper for partial credit," he wrote to the teacher. "She's a good kid under a lot of pressure. We need to be supportive." I saved that too. A clear picture was forming. One set of rules for the privileged and connected, and another, harsher set for everyone else. I was in the everyone else category. My mother reviewed my findings each night. "Good," she'd say, her eyes scanning my reports. "This establishes a pattern of practice. It shows his character. It's the foundation. Now find me the smoking gun." The days bled into one another. My friends, my real friends, would text me, their messages a mix of support and morbid curiosity. "Oh my God, Maya, is it true what they're saying? We have your back. Let us know what we can do." I appreciated their support, but I felt strangely distant. They were still living in the high school world, worried about prom dates and college roommates. I was living in a world of legal briefs and depositions. I felt like I had aged a decade in a month. My only real companion was my mother. We worked late into the nights, the house silent except for the clicking of my keyboard and the rustle of her papers. We'd take breaks and she'd cook. Huge, fragrant pots of chicken adobo or rich, savory care. She told me stories about her own family back in Penangan, about her own struggles to get to law school in America. They underestimated me, too, anak, she told me one night over bowls of rice. They saw a small Filipino woman and they thought I would be a pushover. They didn't see the fire. "You have that same fire, Maya. You just learned how to use it sooner than I did." In those moments, we weren't just a legal team. We were the Villanueva women, and we were drawing strength from a line of fighters that went back generations. We were tired, we were stressed, but we were together, and we were getting closer. The breakthrough came on a Friday afternoon in late August. I was deep into a folder labeled "Deleted Email Fragments," files the school's IT department had been forced to recover. Their lawyers had tried to argue these files were corrupted and unrecoverable. My mother's legal motion had forced their hand. It was the digital trash can, and it was full of treasure. I was searching for any communication between Thompson and James Warner around the date of my expulsion. I found it. A series of 3 emails sent from their personal accounts, not their official school or work addresses. They had tried to hide it. They had failed. The first email was from James Warner to Thompson, sent the night of my expulsion. The subject line was, "Our conversation." "Dan," I'd read, following up on our call. "I appreciate you handling the unfortunate situation with my son so swiftly and discreetly. He's a good boy, just needs to apply himself. I am confident this resolution is for the best and will allow him to focus on his college applications without any unnecessary distractions. I look forward to finalizing the details of our ongoing partnership next week. Best, Jim." My heart hammered against my ribs. Ongoing partnership. The donation for the new athletic complex. It was a quid pro quo. The next email was Thompson's reply, sent early the next morning. "Jim, happy to help. I agree that this was the best path forward for all involved. Zach is a fine young man with a bright future, and Northgate is committed to supporting him. The integrity of the institution is my highest priority, and sometimes that requires decisive action for the greater good. My secretary will be in touch to schedule our meeting regarding the endowment. All the best, Dan." The greater good. My future, my reputation, my entire life's work, sacrificed for the greater good of securing a donation and protecting a rich man's lazy son. The raw, blatant corruption of it took my breath away. But there was one more dot. It was a final. Email from Thompson to his private account, a forwarded copy of an internal email from Mr. Davies, my government teacher. It was a character reference sent unsolicited by Mr. Davies to Principal Thompson on the afternoon of my expulsion, before he knew the final decision. Principal Thompson, Mr. Davies had written, I have just heard the troubling rumors about Maya Villanueva. I feel compelled to write on her behalf. I have had Maya in my class for 2 years. She is, without question, one of the most intellectually honest, diligent, and morally upright students I have ever had the privilege to teach. The idea that she would cheat is, in my professional opinion, utterly inconceivable. I urge you to look at her character and her flawless record before making any rash decisions. She is a credit to the school. Thompson had received this passionate defense from his own department head. And what had he done with it? He had forwarded it to his private email and then deleted the original from his school account. He had buried it. He had willfully suppressed exculpatory evidence. Mom, I called out, my voice shaking. Mom, you need to see this. She came and stood behind me, reading the screen over my shoulder. I watched her reflection in the dark monitor. Her face was calm, but her eyes were burning. She read all 3 emails, then read them again. She reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder. There it is, she whispered, her voice a low, dangerous purr. The whole case, malice, conspiracy, a cover-up. She squeezed my shoulder. They didn't just expel you, Maya, they conspired to frame you and then actively hid evidence that would have cleared you. She straightened up, her decision made. Print them, she said. Print everything? The emails, the records of preferential treatment, all of it. Put it in a binder. What are we going to do? I asked, a slow, cold smile spread across my mother's face. It was the scariest, most beautiful thing I had ever seen. Now, she said, we schedule the depositions. It's time to go. Hunting. The weeks leading up to the deposition were the most intense, grueling boot camp of my life. My mother transformed from my advocate into my drill sergeant. Our kitchen, still smelling faintly of the sinigang that had marked the start of our war, became a mock courtroom. Every night she would grill me, preparing me for the ordeal to come. They will try to paint you as an arrogant, privileged kid who thought she was above the rules, she'd say, her eyes hard. They will twist your good grades into evidence of a win-at-all-costs mentality. You must remain calm. You must not get emotional. Stick to the facts. Yes or no answers whenever possible. Do you understand? Yes, I'd answer. Is your answer yes? Or is it yes, I understand? Yes, good. She made me memorize my written declaration, the one I had poured my heart and soul into, until I could recite it backwards. She wanted the facts to be an extension of my own body, an unbreakable shield. While she drilled me, I had my own project. I took the mountain of evidence we had gathered and distilled it into its most potent form. I created the binder. It was a thick, black 3-ring binder, but it was so much more. It was our arsenal. Each piece of evidence was sleeved in plastic, each section marked with a crisp colored tab. Tab A, preferential treatment, athletics. Tab B, preferential treatment, donors. Tab C, the Warner conspiracy. Tab D, suppression of evidence. It was a meticulous, damning catalog of Daniel Thompson's corruption. On the front, I affixed a simple white label, Villanueva V, Northgate Preparatory Academy. The night before the deposition, my mother made one final move. She made a phone call to a journalist she trusted at the state's largest newspaper, a woman who owed her a favor from years ago. I'm not giving you a story, my mother said, her voice low. I'm giving you a location and a time. Conference. Room B, Sterling, Croft and Dunn, tomorrow at 9 a.m. The deposition of Principal Daniel Thompson. I think you'll find it newsworthy. She hung up. The trap was not just legal. It was public. We were not just going to win. We were going to make sure the world was watching when we did. The conference room at the opposing law firm was a symphony in beige and muted aggression. A long polished table reflected the cold fluorescent lights above. On one side sat Principal Thompson, looking smug and confident in a crisp suit. He was flanked by two lawyers from Sterling, Croft, and Dunn older, silver-haired man named Mr. Sterling, and a sharp-eyed younger woman. On our side, there was just me and my mother. At the head of the table sat the court reporter with her stenography machine and a videographer who aimed a small black camera directly at Thompson's face. The air was thick with tension. My mother began with a deceptive gentleness. For the first hour, her questions were softballs. Please state your name for the record. Daniel Thompson. And what is your occupation? I am the principal of Northgate Preparatory Academy. How long have you held that position? 6 years. She walked him through the school's honor code, his own disciplinary procedures, the events of July 28th from his perspective. He answered with a confident, practiced ease, his lawyers occasionally nodding in approval. He recounted Zach's story as fact. He described my defense as defiant and disrespectful. He was building his narrative, the story of a dedicated principal forced to make a tough but necessary decision. He was lying beautifully and prolifically under oath. My mother let him. She was giving him rope. Lots and lots of rope. Then, after a short break, she picked up the binder. The atmosphere in the room shifted. Principal Thompson, she began, her voice suddenly devoid of its earlier gentleness. Let's talk about your record of enforcement regarding the honor code. She opened the binder to tab A. I'm showing you what we've marked. As Exhibit A, it's an email chain between you and the head football coach, dated October of last year. Do you recognize it? Thompson's eyes flickered to the paper. His confidence wavered for the first time. I believe so. In this email, the coach pleads with you not to suspend his star quarterback for being caught with alcohol on school grounds, correct? Yes, that appears to be correct. And your response was, and I quote, "We can handle this with an internal detention. No need for it to go on his permanent record." Did I read that correctly? Yes. So in that instance, you did not have a zero-tolerance policy, did you, Principal Thompson? Thompson's lawyer, Mr. Sterling, interjected. Objection. This is irrelevant to the case at hand. On the contrary, my mother shot back, her voice like ice. It is profoundly relevant. It speaks to a pattern of arbitrary and capricious enforcement of school policy, a pattern of giving preferential treatment to students the principal deems important. She turned back to Thompson. Let's move on to Exhibit B. She spent the next hour dismantling him. She showed him the emails about the politicians. Daughter. She showed him records of Zach Warner's previous academic infractions, none of which had resulted in more than a slap on the wrist. With each new exhibit, Thompson grew more flustered. His answers became shorter. I don't recall. That was a different situation. I acted in what I believed was the best interest of the student. The confident principal was gone, replaced by a nervous, sweating bureaucrat being cornered. Then my mother turned to tab C, the Warner conspiracy. Principal Thompson, do you have a personal relationship with Mr. James Warner? He is a respected member of the Northgate community. A generous donor. A very generous donor, my mother agreed. I'm showing you what we've marked as Exhibit D, an email from Mr. Warner to your personal email account, sent the night of my daughter's expulsion. He writes, I appreciate you handling the unfortunate situation with my son so swiftly and discreetly. What unfortunate situation was he referring to? Thompson went pale. I believe he was referring to the stress of the cheating allegation. Really? My mother said, her voice dripping with disbelief. Because it sounds like he's thanking you for framing my daughter. He goes on to say, I look forward to finalizing the details of our ongoing partnership next week. What partnership was that, Principal? Objection. Mr. Sterling boomed. Overruled. my mother snapped, not even looking at him. Answer the question, Principal Thompson. We were in discussions about a potential endowment for a new athletic complex. So, just to be clear for the record, my mother said, leaning forward, the night you expelled my daughter, based on flimsy evidence, you were thanked by the father of the accuser, and you were simultaneously negotiating a multi-million-dollar donation from him. Is that correct? Thompson stared at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He was trapped. He knew it. His lawyers knew it. The videographer kept the camera rolling, capturing every bead of sweat on his forehead. My mother saved the best for last. She turned to tab D. One final thing, Principal. I'm showing you Exhibit F, an email sent to you by Mr. Davies. My daughter's a P government teacher on the afternoon of her expulsion. In it, he praises Maya's character, calls her intellectually honest, and says the idea of her cheating is utterly inconceivable. Do you recall receiving this email? Thompson stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. I don't recall this specific email. Liar, he had perjured himself. That's strange, my mother. Sad, her voice silk smooth. Because our forensic analysis of the school's servers shows that this email was received by your inbox at 2:15 p.m. Open at 2:18 p.m., forwarded to your private email address at 2:19 p.m., and then permanently deleted from the school server. At 2:20 p.m., does that refresh your memory, Principal Thompson? Complete, utter silence. He was broken. He had been so thoroughly, so completely, so systematically dismantled that he had nothing left. He slumped in his chair, a ruined man, and muttered the 3 words that sealed his fate. I want my lawyer. My mother closed the binder with a soft, final thump. I think we're done here, she said. The school board hearing was 2 weeks later. It was held in the school auditorium, the same stage where I was supposed to have delivered my valedictorian speech. It was standing room only. The journalist my mother had tipped off had run a front-page story about the deposition, and the community was in an uproar. Parents, students, and news crews packed the room. The 7 members of the school board sat on the stage, looking deeply uncomfortable. My mother didn't need the binder this time. She had a laptop and a projector. She stood at the podium, a figure of absolute command. Good evening, members of the board, parents, students, she began, her voice ringing with clarity and power. My name is Elena Villanueva. My daughter, Maya Villanueva, was, until recently, a student at this school. She was your valedictorian, and on July 28th, she was expelled by Principal Daniel Thompson for a crime she did not commit. For the next 30 minutes, she laid out the entire case, not in complex legal terms, but as a simple, powerful story of corruption and abuse of power. She put the emails up on the giant screen for everyone to see, the preferential treatment, the secret, negotiations with James Warner, the character reference from Mr. Davies that Thompson had tried to hide. Then she played the highlights from the deposition video. The entire auditorium watched as Principal Thompson, projected 10 feet high, lied under oath. They saw him squirm, contradict himself, and ultimately crumble. There were gasps from the audience. Murmurs of outrage grew into a low roar of anger. The board members watched, their faces pale with horror and embarrassment. My mother concluded her presentation, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the board members. This was never about a cheating scandal, she said, her voice resonating with quiet fury. This was about a conspiracy to protect a wealthy family's reputation at the expense of an innocent child's future. A conspiracy led by a man you entrusted with the well-being of our children, a man who buried evidence, who lied under oath, and who abused his power in the most profound way imaginable. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. We are not here tonight asking for a quiet apology. We are not here asking for a simple reinstatement. Her voice rose, filling the auditorium. We are here tonight to demand action. We demand the immediate and public exoneration of Maya Villanueva, and we demand the immediate and summary termination of Principal Daniel Thompson for gross misconduct, conspiracy, and moral bankruptcy. She stepped back from the podium. The auditorium was silent for a beat, and then it erupted. Parents were on their feet, shouting their support. Reporters were flashing pictures. The board members looked at each other, trapped, stunned, their authority completely gone. The carefully controlled world of Northgate Preparatory Academy had been shattered into a million pieces. My mother had not just won, she had conquered. The auditorium erupted. It was not a sound of polite applause, it was a roar. A wave of communal outrage and vindication that washed over the stage and crashed down upon the 7 stunned faces of the school board. Parents were on their feet, shouting. Reporters' cameras flashed like lightning in a hurricane. In the center of it all, my mother stood calm and still at the podium, the architect of the storm. She had not just presented a case. She had passed a sentence. And now the public was her jury and her executioner. The board president, a flustered real estate developer named Mrs. Albright, banged her gavel uselessly against the dais. Order, order. This will be taken under advisement in a closed session. But it was too late for closed sessions. We had blown the doors off their secret chambers and flooded them with sunlight, and the things inside were ugly. My mother gathered her papers, gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod, and we walked off the stage. We were immediately swarmed. Microphones were thrust in my face. Questions were shouted. Maya, how does it feel? What do you have to say to Principal Thompson? Is it true the Warners are trying to withdraw their donation? My mother wrapped a protective arm around me, her voice cutting through the noise like a diamond drill. My daughter will not be making a statement at this time. The evidence we presented tonight speaks for itself. She guided me through the throng, a warrior clearing a path through the battlefield. We didn't look back. We didn't need to. The fire was already consuming everything behind us. The fallout was a blaze that leaped from the auditorium to the entire state. The board's closed session lasted exactly 47 minutes. The verdict was unanimous. A press release was issued before we even made it home. Daniel Thompson was terminated, effective immediately, for gross professional misconduct and actions detrimental to the integrity of the institution. His career in education was over. His name was now synonymous with disgrace. The consequences for Zach Warner were just as swift. Faced with undeniable proof of a conspiracy and immense public pressure, the school had no choice. He was summarily expelled. The local paper ran a story a week later that the Warner family had put their mansion on the market. Their name, once a symbol of philanthropic prestige, was now mud. There was no room for them in the community they had tried to buy. They had been, in a very real sense, exiled. For me, the resolution came in the form of a long, white envelope from the Northgate School District. It was not a letter of expulsion. It was a letter of profound, groveling apology. It stated that my expulsion had been a grievous error, that my academic record had been fully reinstated and expunged of any mention of the incident, and that my status as class valedictorian was restored. They offered to let me deliver my speech at a special ceremony. They offered me my diploma. They offered me back the life they had tried to take. The settlement negotiations were short and brutal. My mother, holding all the cards, didn't negotiate. She dictated terms. The district's expensive lawyers from Sterling, Croft, and Dunn were humbled and compliant. They agreed to a financial settlement so significant that it made headlines, with the stipulation that a large portion of it would be used to fund an independent student advocacy office within the district a watchdog to ensure something like this could never happen again. They agreed to rewrite their disciplinary code. They agreed to everything. It was not a settlement, it was a surrender. The acceptance letters from Stanford, Yale, and Duke arrived again within the week. This time accompanied by personal letters from the deans of admissions, apologizing for the preliminary rescission and reaffirming their offer. My future, which had been a shattered wreck, had been meticulously rebuilt. It was all there, waiting for me. All I had to do was step back into it, but something had changed. One night, my mother and I were sitting on our back patio. The legal battle was over. The victory was total. So, she said, her voice softer than I'd heard it in months. Have you decided? Which university will it be? I looked out at the quiet suburban night. I'm not going back to Northgate, Mom. She nodded slowly. I understand. You don't have to. You can get your diploma through the district. It's not just the school, I said, struggling to find the words. It's everything, my whole plan. Pre-law at Stanford, then Stanford Law. It was a perfect, neat equation. It was my path. And it can be again, she said gently. But I'm not the same person who made that plan. I said, the truth of it hitting me with full force. That girl believed in the system. She believed that if you worked hard and followed the rules, you'd be rewarded. She was smart, but she was naive. That girl had died in Principal Thompson's office. I was someone new. I was the girl who had sat in a deposition room and watched a powerful man crumble. I was the girl who had sifted through mountains of data to find the hidden truth. I had seen the law not as an abstract concept in a textbook, but as a living, breathing weapon, a weapon that could be used to destroy a life or to save one. The thought of just going back to being a student, of sitting in a classroom and pretending the last few months hadn't happened, felt impossible. It felt like a retreat. The settlement money sat in a trust account, a staggering number with a lot of zeros. I could have bought a car, a condo, a lifetime of security, but it felt like blood money. It was compensation for a wound, and I knew I couldn't heal until I had transformed that wound into something else. The idea came to me late one night while I was reading through the dozens of emails I received from other students, kids from other schools who had heard my story and wanted to share their own. Stories of unfair suspensions, of bullying that teachers ignored, of administrators who didn't listen. They were all stories of helpless kids up against a powerful and different system. They didn't have a mother like mine. They had no one, Mom. I said the next morning over breakfast. I know what I want to do with the money. I laid out my plan. Not a charity, but an engine, a nonprofit foundation. The Villanueva Student Advocacy Foundation. Its mission would be to provide free legal resources and representation to students facing unjust disciplinary action, discrimination, or harassment in public schools. It would be a voice for the voiceless, a shield for the vulnerable. We would hire lawyers, create a network of volunteers, and build a system to fight the system. My mother listened, her expression unreadable. When I was finished, she was silent for a long time. I saw tears welling in her eyes. Of all the cases I have ever won, she said, her voice thick with an emotion I had rarely seen from her, this one, you are my greatest victory, Maya. She reached across the table and took my hand. And yes, I think that is a brilliant idea. I will help you run it. In that moment, I knew my future. Stanford was still the goal, but pre-law wasn't just a track anymore. It was a calling. I wasn't just going to study the law. I was going to wield it. I was going to be my mother's daughter. 1 year later. It's Monday, July 28th, 2026, just after 9:30 at night. I am sitting not in my childhood bedroom, but in a dorm room at Stanford University, the California. Air cool against the window pane. The room is filled with books, but they aren't just for my classes. They're for my other life. On my laptop screen is a video call. It's my mother. She's in her kitchen back home, the familiar smell of garlic and soy sauce practically wafting through the screen. She's making adobo, of course. The school district in Riverside is trying to stonewall us on the discovery request for the Mendoza case. I say, scrolling through a legal document. Their lawyer is claiming the emails are privileged. My mom laughs, the sound warm and familiar. Privileged? Please, they're scared. File a motion to compel. Drown him in paper, Anak. Make him regret the day he ever heard our name. On. I say, smiling. We talk for another hour. Half about legal strategy for the Foundation's latest case. Half about my classes and the friends I've made. The line between mother and daughter, between mentor and colleague, has blurred into a beautiful, powerful partnership. When we hang up, I lean back in my chair. A year ago tonight, my world had been a smoking crater. My future, a question mark. The revenge had been necessary. The victory had been sweet. But they were just a chapter. The real story wasn't about the tearing down. It was about the building up that came after. I looked at the case file on my screen. A 16-year-old girl, a talented artist, accused of vandalism she didn't commit, about to be expelled from a magnet school. Her file was just like mine, but her ending would be different. Because now she had someone on her side. She had us doubt the anger from that time is gone, mostly. It has been reforged into something more durable, more useful. Purpose. The revenge wasn't just about destroying Principal Thompson's career. It was about building my own. They tried to take my future, so I took theirs, and in doing so, I found a future for myself far greater than the one I had planned. My life is no longer a pristine, perfect equation. It's messy, it's challenging, and it is profoundly, deeply meaningful. I am not just a survivor of my story. I am the author of it, and this is just the beginning. I straightened my tie, a silk Hermes that James Warner had given me for Christmas, and gave my lawyer, Sterling, a confident nod. The conference room was bland, designed to sap the will to live, but I felt a familiar surge of authority. This was my world, managing perceptions, handling difficult people. And Elena Villanueva, for all the bluster of her ridiculous $20 million lawsuit, was just another difficult person, an emotional mother, and over her head. Across the table, she sat with her daughter. The girl, Maya, looked pale and nervous, clutching a pen like a rosary. Good. She should be nervous. She had thrown her future away with this stunt. Her mother was sharp-looking, I give her that. Dressed in a severe navy suit, she had the posture of a fighter, but I dealt with her kind before. My daughter is a special angel who could never do wrong. They all sang the same song. Ready, Dan? Sterling murmured, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. Let's get this over with, I said with a sigh, projecting an air of weary patience. The first hour was exactly as Sterling had prepped me it would be. Mrs. Villanueva's questions were basic, pedestrian. She asked about the school's honor code, my duties, the timeline of events. I answered calmly, my voice resonating with the quiet authority I had cultivated over 6 years as principal of Northgate. I painted the picture I wanted the record to show, a fair but firm administrator upholding the high standards of my institution in the face of a clear violation. I glanced at Maya. She wouldn't meet my eyes. The girl was guilty as sin, and her defiance in my office had been nothing more than a desperate, arrogant bluff. I was in complete control. After the break, something shifted. Mrs. Villanueva returned to the table and placed a thick, black binder in front of her. It was meticulously organized, with colored tabs sticking out from the side. It was unprofessional. The sort of thing an overeager amateur would do. Principal Thompson, she began, and the gentle. Parental tone was gone, replaced by something cold and precise. Let's talk about your record of enforcement regarding the honor code. She opened the binder. I'm showing you what we've marked as Exhibit A. It was my email to the football coach. I felt a flicker of annoyance. How did she get that? It didn't matter. I handled it smoothly, explaining that leadership required a nuanced approach, that each situation was unique. She listened, her face impassive. I see, she said, a nuanced approach. Then she slid another paper across the table. Exhibit B, my email about the politician's daughter. Was this another nuanced approach, Principal? The annoyance was curdling into something else. A prickle of unease. She was building a narrative. A false one, of course. A distortion of my record as a compassionate, pragmatic leader. I acted in what I believed was the best interest of the student, I said, my voice tight. Sterling gave me a slight, warning shake of his head. Keep it simple, Dan. The best interest of the student, Mrs. Villanueva repeated, her voice flat. She had an unnerving stillness about her now. She wasn't a hysterical mother. She was something else. Let's talk about another student. You had the best interests of Zach Warner. She flipped to a new section in her binder. Tab C, my heart gave a hard, painful thud against my ribs. Do you have a personal relationship with Mr. James Warner? She asked. He is a respected member of the Northgate community. I recited, the words tasting like ash. A very generous donor, she said, her eyes locking onto mine. They were not the eyes of a mother. They were the eyes of a hunter. I'm showing you what we've marked as Exhibit D, an email from Mr. Warner to your personal email account, sent the night of Maya's expulsion. I stared at the printout. My own words, Jim's own words, wrenched from the privacy of my inbox and laid bare on this sterile table. My blood ran cold. The room felt suddenly, claustrophobically hot. What unfortunate situation was he referring to? She asked, her voice a stiletto. My mind raced, scrambling for the spin, the stress of the allegation. Yes, that was good, plausible. I said the words, but they sounded weak, hollow. I could feel Sterling's disapproval beside me. I was talking too much, and the ongoing partnership? She pressed, relentless. What was that? Objection. Sterling's voice boomed, a welcome interruption, but she just steamrolled. Him. Answer the question, Principal Thompson. I stammered something about an endowment, a potential donation. I saw the look on her face, a flicker of a smile. A shark tasting blood in the water. She knew? She was piecing it together for the record, constructing a story that was all sharp edges and ugly implications. A story where I was not the hero. My confidence was gone, replaced by a rising tide of panic. This woman, this quiet Filipino lawyer, was not out of her depth. She was trying to drown me. Then she delivered the killing blow. Tab D, I'm showing you Exhibit F, she said, her voice now almost a whisper. An email sent to you by Mr. Davies. In it, he praises Maya's character, calls the idea of her cheating utterly inconceivable. Do you recall receiving this email? I looked at the printout. I felt the floor drop out from under me. It was the email, the one I had deleted, the one I had buried. I don't recall this specific email, I lied, my voice a dry croak. It was a weak, pathetic lie, but it was all I had left. That's strange, she said, leaning forward, her eyes pinning me to my chair. Because our forensic analysis of the school servers shows that this email was received by your inbox at 2:15 p.m., opened at 2:18 p.m., forwarded to your private email address at 2:19 p.m., and then permanently deleted from the school's server at 2:20 p.m. Does that refresh your memory, Principal Thompson? The world went silent. The air crackled. Forensic analysis. She had proof, not just of my decision, but of my intent. Of the cover-up. It was over. My career, my reputation, my planned ascension to superintendent, all of it turned to smoke in an instant. All because of this stubborn, quiet girl and her vicious, smiling mother. I looked past the woman at the girl, Maya. She was watching me, her expression not hateful, not triumphant, but something far worse. It was calm. It was clinical. Like a scientist observing a specimen as it died in a petri dish. This disrespectful, defiant child had brought my entire world crashing down. The hatred I felt for her was so pure, so absolute. It was incandescent. The room was spinning. Sterling was saying something, but his voice was a distant buzz. The court reporter's fingers were still flying across her machine, recording my ruin. The camera's little red light was still on, a malevolent, unblinking eye. They had me. They had won. They had destroyed me. My throat was tight. I couldn't breathe. All I could think to do was to make it stop. To end the humiliation, I want my lawyer, I choked out. The words of surrender. Elena Villanueva leaned back in her chair. The hunt was over. A slow, cold smile spread across her face. It was the scariest, most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I think we're done here, she said.